Our next training is going to be on Thursday, September 24th. That will be the FY21L EMIS staff course checklist. And then on October 1st, we will be covering the assessment checklist, including the assessment pre-IDs. Right. Let's go ahead and get started here. If you need the checklist that we'll be following along with, it is out here under the procedural checklist on the customer portal. If you go to products and then student information, and then select the procedural checklist, student folder, and here is the attendance procedural checklist. Now, I did make some updates to some of the screenshots in here, but I did not get them all completed. So there will be more updates, but again, those are just screenshot updates, no functionality changes to be documented in here. So let's go in here. You can see we are on the 20.1 version. It has the new purple color scheme behind it, so that's what we're going to be using for our training today, except when we get to the period attendance portion, we're going to jump over to a 20.0 environment because that's the only one that has a period attendance school in it. So starting with setting up our absence types. So absence types are school and school year specific. So let's go to absence types. If your districts want to, maybe they're at building level now, as example this one is, we're in the high school and these are all at building level. We can tell because they have the trash can and the edit pencil. If they decide they want to switch to district level absence types, that is best to do between school years. Okay, these will all copy up during SYI, so if they want to make the change once they would have initialized for 2021, that's when they would want to go in and make those updates. So now is not the time you want to go in and change to district level absence types. So in looking at these here, we're going to go ahead and add a new one so we can see what all fields are here. So if we need to add an absence type, we'll add one for college visits here. We need our code and the name. Description's optional. The qualifier, what is this going to qualify as for the attendance? So we have an option to mark it here as a late tardy. It can be just absent, partial, and remember the partials in order to be counted in the HB 410 calculations must have a time in and or time out, same with late tardy or a non-absence. In this case, we're going to mark this college visit as a non-absence. Is it an excused absence? You would either check this or leave it unchecked. This absence group, this medical, the absence group was actually just added, I think it was in 19.2. And previously we had, you could select if this was an out-of-school suspension because those are calculated differently for, or used differently in the HB 410 calculations. And as we know, last year they implemented the HB, so 166 for the attendance calculations to exclude the medical absences for medical, or for the excessive absences thresholds. So this absence group was added. So in this one, I'm just going to leave it marked none. But if it was a medical absence type, I could mark medical here. And if it's my out of school suspension code, I'd want to click that so that those are calculated correctly during the HB 410 calculations. All right, this building is a daily attendance school, so I want to check use for daily attendance. So I'm going to check that. If a period attendance schools, of course, you mark use for period attendance. This report to EMIS, this is no longer used. The absence types are not reported to EMIS, just the totals from the FS attendance tab. There's the school year attendance hours, the school year excused absence hours, and the school year unexcused absence hours. So that is what is reported to EMIS. So checking this report to EMIS on the absence types is not necessary. And if they have it checked, that's fine also. And then of course we have is active. This is a new one we're adding, so we're going to leave it checked is active and select save. And looking at this screen here, as we look down, we can see our absence groups here. We do have this medical excuse is marked as a medical for the absence group, and then also our out of school suspension option is marked there too. So you can have multiple medical absence types if you'd like, and you just want to make sure that they are marked, the absence group is marked as medical. Okay, so that is our absence types. Next, we're going to move on to student information options. And we're going to look at the attendance tab. This is where we state whether this is a daily attendance or a period attendance school. All right, so the first thing we see here is this absence cutoff time. This is what is used in period attendance to determine whether it is an AM or PM absence type. Really just what it marks when it converts it to a daily attendance. So what is the cutoff time for it to be AM or PM? This disable late option, this just determines if late is an available option to select on the teacher menu. So if teachers are entering their absences in student information, do you want them to be able to select late, tardy, or can they only leave it marked none or absent only? So I'm going to leave that unchecked for now. The method, of course, are we daily or period attendance? And this one is a daily attendance school. And the frequency, how many times per day are you taking attendance? A lot of schools are only taking attendance once per day. And then you'll notice this collection drop down is going to change. So if they're only taking it once per day, what period are they taking it? Are they taking it during the homerooms? And then they have all their periods listed. And if they're doing it twice per day, what 2 periods are they taking it? So you just have to select those applicable collection periods in these drop downs. The allow teacher to override, if you see when I check that, it's going to spin for a second, and then we're going to see this max override days appear. This determines the number of days forward and backwards that a teacher can override office entered absences. So if I don't want the teachers to override anything the office has entered, I would leave that unchecked. If I want to allow them to go in and make updates just for the current date, then I'm going to leave this max override days set to 1. If I want to allow them to go back 5 days, I can change this to 5, and it's going to allow them to go forward and back that many days to make changes to absences that were entered by the office or updated by the office. But again, if I don't want the teachers making any changes, I would just leave that allow teacher to override unchecked, and they will not be able to do so. So any changes to student absences, once entered by the teacher, must be done by the office staff. Okay. Then down here, under the default settings, we get this question a lot at the beginning of the school year. They're entering absences through gradebook, and they come in and the office staff is trying to make updates and they're getting an error, or someone brings a note in and someone from the office tries to go directly into student information to enter the student absent and they're getting an error. If these default absence types are not selected, or not, these drop downs are not populated, that's why that error is occurring. So all they have to do is simply go in and select what their default absence type is going to be for both partials, which is going to typically be their tardy, and then for their default absences that are entered. And we're going to save that. The other important item on the student information options that you need to have checked is under the scheduling tab. You need to confirm that the default calendar is set and also the schedule result is finalized here in order to be able to take attendance. Right. Moving on to absence reasons. And I think with everything going on right now, absence reasons are becoming more and more frequently used because you can enter just an excused absence for a student, but you can have a large array of absence reasons to select from for the students. So if we want to add an absence reason, and these are optional, okay, these are not required, they're not reported either. So this is just more for the school's tracking. So if I want to add one, I'm going to select add absence reason code. We'll say home quarantine. I can enter that. Use for daily or period attendance. Save. And that has been added to my list of absence reasons. All of these, the absence types, reasons, and notes as we go through, if you click on any of these headers up here, those columns can all be sorted by doing so. So you see we have all of our codes that are numbers listed at the top and the alpha codes listed down below. Right, let's go back to attendance administration and go to absence notes. Again, these are optional. So if we want to add a court document in here that a student brought in for a day, add that. Again, we need to make sure it's checked used for daily or period attendance if we want to be able to select it, and save that. On the last code we're going to talk about here is the lunch type codes. And these are optional, but if you want, if the schools are taking, getting lunch counts while they're entering the attendance, this will show up when we go to the teacher menu screen. We'll see that here shortly, but to add one, so they have a salad bar. I don't know that they really have any options right at this time, but we'll just go in and enter that information. And then these 3 codes will be what shows on the teacher menu when they're entering absences through student information. Okay. So that's the codes that are associated with the attendance. Moving on, the next task number 6 says define subcalendars. Those are typically done during SYI, so if you have any questions on those, you want to refer back to the calendar with EMIS exceptions procedural checklist. And then task number 7, we already touched on that, is confirming the default calendar on the student information options. Okay, staff member associations, that is task number 9, and that is where you can assign a staff member to have the rights of another staff member so they can see the attendance module through the teacher menu. So let me go over here to staff. And if I go view staff members, I'm not sure, I gotta think what this is all scrambled data in here, so it's not going to find. Here we go, that's right, I'm Adam Randolph. So if I click in here and edit my staff record, okay, you can see down here I just have a job function of teacher assigned to myself, but if I wanted to add for a specific teacher by editing this staff record, I could go in here and select the school. I'm sorry, this is just the job functions. This is what I'm doing. Adding the job functions for the teacher so I can see those that are on the teacher menu. Whoop, because I already have it in here. All right, let's move on to taking the daily attendance. So there's several ways in student information that you can take daily attendance. The first one we're going to talk about is the attendance fast entry screen. And schools do attendance in a variety of ways, as you all know. Maybe they gather a list of parents that called in, left messages on the voicemail or emails. They want to enter all of those at lunch at one time. Also, the attendance fast entry is great at JVS for the homeschool, let's say the homeschool has a snow day and the JVS wants to enter all the students that are affiliated with that particular homeschool to have an excused absence for the day or an excused day because their homeschool canceled, you can do a search by the homeschool IRN right here. Let's go first. Let's say we have a list of student numbers and we need to enter an absence for all of them. So we're going to leave it as today's date. Our absence type code defaults to excused absence. That's what we selected on the student information options page. So, and we have the student IDs, so we're going to select here under our search mode to enter the student IDs. And we're just going to enter them in there. 6885. All right, include students with absences. What that's going to do is if any of these students already have an absence entered, it's still going to return those students. And if I leave this unchecked, this vary absence types by students, and select preview students, you'll see when the students appear, I don't have any options over here to select absence type or absence levels. If I do check that prior to previewing the students, if I didn't have it checked and saved it, they're all going to just have an excused absence, full absence. But if I select this vary absence type by student, I can go ahead, maybe this one is an unexcused absence. I can make those changes in the drop downs there, and then I can save. Okay. Let's enter those same student IDs, and then we'll see that they do show up with absences already entered. So because I have that checked, and now when I go to preview the students, I can see they already have these absence types in here. And if I need to make a change to this, I can go ahead and do so now. Okay, for schools that are tracking when particular groups are out for field trips, maybe out of the building for a field trip, they can also use this attendance fast entry screen and enter these non-absences in here for all of the 10th graders, let's say, or 11th graders. Saying student ID is required because I still have that selected here. But if I change my search mode back to search for students, and I select grade level 11, and preview, as we have our list of students returned here, we can see they all have this field trip already set in there. Maybe we know Randy's mom, maybe when we entered this, we hadn't entered his absence yet, but we received a call from Randy's mom that he was ill. We can go ahead and mark him with his excused absence for the day. Maybe Sharon's not going to be there because she's on a college visit. You can make those adjustments right in here. As you notice, some of these students are grayed out, so I cannot select anything for them. So for Jessica, Dustin, they're all grayed out. That means they're on a non-attending, the calendar they're on, the date that we chose up here at the top, so 9/22, is a non-attending day on the calendar they are assigned to. So we're not able to enter any absences for them, so they will show, but they will be grayed out. So I can go, there's a lot of 11th graders. Doubt they all went, but we're going to say they sent 388 of them on a field trip. So I can go ahead and save that record. And that was added to all the students. Now, the one downfall to this page is you cannot enter an absence range. So I know, especially with the quarantines going on, we've had several requests for that. As we get to the student absence screen, you'll see that there is a range that you can add, a range of dates for students. But in this case, if we needed to add, if we had a list of students and we needed to add, so they were out of school for 2 weeks, we can go in here and pick our absence, whatever it, we'll just pick something different. I don't know what this is. Let's say this is how we're tracking our quarantine students. If we select retain values, and we'll select our home quarantine absence reason. If we select this retain values, and let's enter just a couple student numbers here. Whoop. These are the ones we used earlier. So we'll start with beginning tomorrow. They're under this quarantine since we already added absences for today. Oh shoot, sorry about that. Anytime you make a change, it clears out your student IDs so that you don't add them to the wrong students. Okay. So we have retained values checked, so we're going to go ahead and select preview students. And there's our 3 students, so they have that absence type mark, so we're going to enter it for September 23rd. And when we save, you'll see that these values are still retained up there, so now we can go and select September 24th. Just going to copy and paste these student IDs in there and click preview. And I can add it for the 24th. So that's the quickest way to do it. If you have a lot of students, just enter all their student IDs in there and just go through each date and add it, or you can add a range to each individual student, which we'll get to shortly here. And then again, as I mentioned, if the homeschool is out for some reason for a snow day and the JVS is still in session, they can search by the homeschool IRN and enter a non-absence type or however they code them for those students that are not there due to the snow day at the homeschool. Okay, so all of those 11th graders we added absences to. Let's say we realize we should have, it was the 10th grade field trip, not 11th grade field trip. We need to remove all those. Or we grouped a bunch of students under that home quarantine that should not have been grouped that way. So we want to delete all of those out. We can go to the attendance fast delete here. And if I select today's date, 9/22, if I leave this as is and preview students, I'm going to see every student that has an absence entered for today's date. Did I not save that for the field trip? I thought we saved it. Whoop. Just go into the daily absence list here to see what we have for today. I must not have saved it. All right, let me go in and add them again here. So I'm going to go back to the fast entry.
Hey, Devin.
Yes?
Amy Rickert put in a chat that used the date of the 23rd instead.
Oh, did I?
So,
thank you. I don't know why I don't see my...
thanks, Amy.
I don't see my chats. There it is. Thank you, Amy. We'll go back to the fast delete and we'll delete those for the 23rd. All right, so change our date to the 23rd. What in the world? Let me just add them back in here for the 22nd and we'll go on. And because I have that retained value still marked and I'm still in the same session of student information, it is still going to keep those values in there. So if I'm need to change that, leave that blank, clear that out. You know what I did? I didn't check any of them. That's why I saved it, but I just didn't check them. I'm going to go ahead and change a couple here. Let's say this student's an excused absence. This was an excused absence. And then we'll go down here. and save all of those. Okay, so now we have all of those saved and we realize it should have been our 10th graders. So now we're going to go into our attendance fast delete option here. So we can delete those in bulk. So to do so, we have 9/22 field trip. If I just enter the date, I'm going to get all of the students that had any sort of absence entered for today. So if I just leave it at 9/22 and click preview, it's going to give me all of those students who have legitimate medical absences, or this student has an excused or unexcused. It's going to give me all of them, and I don't want to delete those. So on here, I am going to select the absence type code. I only want to remove the ones who have the absence type code of field trip. Now if I click preview, I should not see Roberto or Sergio. I don't see those on here anymore. I only see those with an absence type of field trip. From there, I can select all. If there's any that are going with the 10th graders, I could uncheck those, and then I can click the delete option and all of those are removed. Then I can go back in and add them for the same ones. One thing to keep in mind, as you see with the message here, once you delete absences, there is no record of them any longer. So those are permanently deleted. They are not inactivated. They are permanently gone, whether you delete them from the fast delete screen or from the individual student screens. So moving on here to task number 12, and that is entering absences through the student school absence screen. So from here, we're going to go ahead and put a student in context. And I'm just going to do a search for students here. We have Sandra Abbott. I'm just going to make a note of that in case we need to come back to her shortly. Nine 98643. So we can see she has an absence in here already for September 3rd. We can see the details about that one when she was on a default calendar. It is a full absence that was added for her. She had an excused absence. It was a personal illness. And it was last modified by myself on September 3rd at 3:26 p.m. If I go in and make any changes to that, or anyone goes in and makes any changes, it is going to update that last modified date and time, and along with list the user's name. So let's say I put a timeout here of 8:21 and save it. You can see that last modified was updated, and it still shows myself as the user. Again, if I select delete here, there is no record of that. This entire line will be completely gone. And it is, Laura cannot find those in the database either, so be very careful when entering absences for, or deleting absences for a student. So as we mentioned earlier, using a date range to add absences. If I select add absence here, and let's say this student had to be out for quarantine, can select add absence. We can enter our date range. So if we want today to be the starting date and our end date is 2 weeks out, go through October 6th, we can update it with the applicable absence type codes. Oh, this one, because they collect the daily attendance twice per day, we need to select which collection period this is for. And then we're going to say our quarantine. And now I can save that, and I just entered absences for that whole range for this student. It is going to tell me the dates that are not attending, so these are what fall over the weekend. And there's all of those entered at one shot. Okay, of course, if you need to add absences for just an individual date, you're just going to leave the date with just the starting date in there. You're not going to enter your range. We'll just leave an excused absence in here. With the full absence, we can still put a time in or a time out. And oh, she already has an absence for today. So because this IH one here, IHI, is considered a non-absence, that's why I was able to add another full absence for today, but you cannot add 2 full absences for the same date. Okay. Again, if a student's on a non-attending day, say their calendar was non-attending, or they were on a non-attending calendar last week and they're now enrolled in your building, you can't enter an absence for a date that they were on a non-attending calendar, a non-attending date on their assigned calendar. Okay. And again, you have all your sort options up here, so if you need to filter, you can do that. Or not filter, but sort those. You'll notice the period attendance tab is grayed out, so I cannot click over to that. If I want to see the student's full year statistics, I can click on this option here, and it's going to give me a summary of the absence events that the student has entered and how many total for each absence type they have. We also have external absences in here. These do now include the hours, so you can use them as a reference when you're doing HB 410 calculations. They are not included in those calculations. They're only for a reference. So still under the attendance menu. And this is when the JVS exports their attendance to the home schools. Sometimes they do it mid-year and at the end of the year. Others just do it at the very end of the year. But when they do, and we use that homeschool import process to bring those in, this is where those records are going to be stored at. So if I want to, I can also add them individually for a student. So I would just click external absences, add external absences, and then I can enter the school IRN here, where they came from, and how many days that student attended there. Maybe he was only there a couple days this year. Let's say 30. These hours are not making sense probably, but I can save those and have those there for reference. If we go back to Sandra, she might have some total absences in here. I'm just going to flip over to her profile here quick. When I said earlier that the report to EMIS is not required on the absence types, and I mentioned that the FS attendance tab is where the EMIS reporting comes from. So that is, of course, under the student's profile, and it's these fields down here. So this is what is actually reported to EMIS, nothing with those absence types. Okay, from this screen, you do see you have the option to go to the absence alerts and interventions page. So I can click that and go over to that student absence intervention page. And then from there, I do have the option here to click and go to external student absences or just the student absences page as well. And then vice versa on the student absences page, I have the option here to click back to the student absence intervention page. Okay, let's see. Just checking my notes here. Let's go into the teacher menu, which this is going to be under task number 14, enter absences via daily attendance by classroom. So I do have impersonations to be this teacher, to be any teacher. So if I go here under teacher menu and go to daily attendance and select a period, one of my collection periods, I'll do period 1. And select a course, so CP English. Now I can go in here, you'll notice right at the top I have the lunch counts. So if I have students that are ordering lunch today, I can put those total lunch counts in there. I need to make a note of this teacher name quick. Ramona Navarro. So we can check that. And then I can select the students late. Remember in the student information, the options, I did not have that late option. I did not say to disable that, so I have the option to select it here. However, you'll notice up here the date, I can't select anything there because if you remember back to the student information options, I left the allow teacher to override unchecked. So let's mark a couple students late and absence in here. And just so I have their names for later, I'm just going to take a screenshot. We have that. Let's put a quick note in here for him. That's what he told the teacher, and submit our attendance. So Ramona Navarro has submitted her attendance for period 1 collection. And now you'll notice once those students have something marked, they are grayed out. They cannot be changed anymore. I could go in and now mark Eddie absent because he doesn't have anything in there. And then once I do that, I can no longer make any changes to him either. So now if I go back to our daily absence list, so teachers are only going to see their, be able to select for themselves in here if they're using this screen. If I go back to the daily absence list, I can see all these absences I have entered in here. And here was a student that I entered through the teacher menu. And you can see I know the comments that the teacher put in are still showing up here. So from here, if the school receives a note, they can go in and say note. They can go in and put the time that the student actually came in. They can go in and make any edits to those that they'd like. And then save them. Once a teacher enters their attendance through student information, now if they're entering them in gradebook, which likely they are, this daily attendance completion list is not going to help you out in student information. This is only if they're entering absences in student information. We can go in for a particular date and see who has entered their absences for this date. So if I go all the way down here, I can see Ramona Navarro is the only one that has entered any attendance for the current date through the teacher menu. Okay. And then also those lunch counts, what happens with those? Well, there's a page in here that someone could go in once everyone has entered their attendance for the day. They could go in and view the lunch counts. And again, none of these teachers have entered anything, but if we go all the way down to the bottom here, we're going to see Ramona and her total lunch counts. And then at the very bottom, we're going to see all of the total lunch counts. So is there any questions right now on entering attendance for daily attendance schools, or removing those attendance, editing attendance, anything like that? Okay, we are going to jump over to a different environment. This one is still on our 20.0, and this student here is scrambled. We only have one student scrambled in here. Just to show the period attendance, and this is in 1920 also. So to show you a few things, I'm going to go over here to, oh shoot, student information options. We're going to look at the attendance tab if you are a period attendance school. Now, one of the biggest things to keep in mind with period attendance school, we had a lot of questions about them this year. One of the big factors with period attendance is, let's say the student comes in 15 minutes late to a period. You can't mark them late for 15 minutes of a period. They're either late, they're either missing, absent the whole period, or they're there the whole period. as we get back, when we jump back over to the student absence screen and are entering a period attendance for a student, there's no time in and time out on period attendance. So as far as the calculations, that's been a big factor because they can't, there's no late settings on there for period attendance. So as I mentioned, this absence cutoff time, this is just going to say whether it shows an AM or PM when it does the period to daily conversion. These other fields up here are the same, again, related to the teacher menu. You still need your default absence types in here, so when you're entering them, that's what they will default to. And then you have your period thresholds here. So period threshold of 4. This is how many periods of the day is used to determine if the absence is considered a half day, or how many periods have to be missed in order for it to be converted to a full day absence. So what this is saying here is if a student misses 4 or less periods, they have a half day absence, and if they miss 5 or more, it's a full day absence. Okay. The other thing with period attendance, as far as it relates to the HB 410, on the periods of the day, they must have the start and stop times entered for every period in order for it to calculate. Okay. These do copy up during SYI, but the first time that, no, I'm sorry. They can be entered during SYI and copied out to all the rotation days, but they don't copy up. We do have enhancements out there for that. But this is what is used for the HB 410 calculations for period attendance schools. So they must have all of these start and stop times entered on any of them that are used during the school day. Many schools do have some extra periods out here that they just use for other coding, and so you can see here they don't have start and stop times because those are not counted in attendance. So let's go back to our student here and his school absences page. Now the teacher menu is going to look the same. You're going to have, you're going to select the particular period and the teacher name, and then mark your student absent or there. In here, we have all of these absences that were already entered for a student. So you'll see here, we have the period attendance tab enabled. Daily attendance is still enabled because when students miss so many periods, the system auto-generates those daily attendance records for the students. Of course, again, you're going to notice there's no time in and time out on any of these daily attendance records because it just uses the thresholds that were set to generate these daily attendance entries. So if we go back to the period attendance and we want to add an absence, again, sorry, we're in the 1920 school year. So let's go back here. Well, let's keep it in May 7th. So on May 7th, once we select that, all the periods that the student has available to enter an absence for are going to be displayed here. So for this, if the student doesn't have a period 7 class, nothing's going to be displayed. We will not be able to choose period 7. But if I want to, I'm just going to leave him unexcused, and so I'll say he was out during periods 1, 2, and 3. And we'll just put an excuse in there. But again, you notice there's no time in, time out. So we're going to save that. Periods 1, 2, and 3 are going to show for May 7th for that student. He has a doctor's excuse. They did not meet our threshold, so they're not going to show. May 7th is not going to show over here on daily attendance, just on the period attendance tab. And that student's going to be counted absent for the full length of time for all 3 of those periods. So it is very important to know if you have schools considering moving to period attendance. Okay. The other thing, there is a script that has to be set up so that when you register a new student, there's a nightly script that runs, and then that will add that student in so you can add period attendance for them. So there is a script that runs nightly with period attendance schools. I know that was a quick synopsis of period attendance. Do you guys have any questions on that? Or if you have schools using it and have questions, of course, feel free to send us a ticket about that. All right, I'm going to jump back over to our 20.1 environment, and we're going to look at some of the attendance reports. So we checked the checklist here. Task number 16 was viewing the daily absences, which we did that, and the daily attendance completion list. We ran that, and the lunch counts, which takes us down to task number 20, which is the R309A, and that is the student absence search detail. So I have some of these already run, so we didn't have to wait for them to generate. So any of the absences we just added are not going, oops, I clicked on the ad hocs. And I apologize, we have an issue in this environment. Even though they complete, they're all showing with the job status of error here, so I need to report that so we can get that straightened out. But they did complete. So let's take a look at several of these. The R309A, these are not updated with the hours. These are simply the daily attendance counts. So it does tell us our time in and time out, but this one was entered as a full medical or full excused absence. So you're going to see your days absent is 1. And that's going to list each individual student on its own page. So that was the R309A. The R309B, this is the one that several releases ago, we did have the hours added to it. Actually, I think it was like 2 years ago, and that had to be removed because there was multiple issues with it. So in this one, if we can filter, same with the R309A, filter by the number of days absent. So in here, if we put 2 to 20 days absent or partial absences. Now, in partial absences that are referenced on these reports that are in student information are not talking about those that have the qualifier of partial. It is talking about a true partial absence, like an AM or a PM absence that was selected. It's not looking at those partial qualifiers in this statement here. So if I go back to the R309B that we ran, again, oh, that's an 8th grader. Here's any the students that have more than or 2 to 20 absences for the date range that we selected. On the R307, daily office report of student absences. So I did this just for last week. So I can see for each date last week, 9/14, these are the only 2 students who had absences entered for that day. Any details about those absences, and then for the 15th and so on for the rest of the week. And then the PERF report, the perfect attendance report, that one of course does not include the partials either. So under ad hocs, jump over there, under the analytics hub, there's a yearly absence detail with perfect attendance report, and that's the one that can be used in place of that perfect attendance report that is in student information. In a second, it's taking a minute to pop up here. Okay, so if we go under attendance, and we'll see yearly absence detail with perfect attendance. So it's going to show students that have a total absence value of 0. So that's the one that they can use. That will look at those that have the absence qualifier of partial. And then another one that is frequently used is the R500, the district-wide membership report. And same yet again, it is not updated for partials, but it does still have some good information on here. And this is going to list each student and how many absences they have for all the days so up to this point. Okay, attendance letters are still used. So let's go over to letters. Now these are not the letters that are printed from the student absence intervention page. Okay, these are the attendance letters that they would, previous to HB 410, that they were sending to say, oh, not those letters, to say a student had missed, X number of days of school. We're still working on adding to student information a way to bulk generate those actual absence intervention letters. Somewhat similar, I believe, to the absence letters that I'm going to show you now. But I mean, of course, you can change the comments on here. You may, I don't know that anyone is actually using them for the intervention at all, but I know some are still using these attendance letters. Okay, so you can see if we go in here and look, gonna view the rules for this 3-day letter. And I can see what this one's telling me is I want to find any student who have unexcused absences, at least 3 unexcused absences, and I want to generate a letter for these students if I run this C1 letter rule. So when you're talking about the letters and you see the precedence that's set up here, a 5-day precedence is going to have a higher or less severe precedence than a 15-day letter. Okay, so the higher the precedence, the less severe it is. And let me click back over here quick. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to put these under 1 letter rule so that I can run it, because I did not realize that this was set up this way. But it's set up that way, you're going to have a lot of duplicate or multiple letters for the students, because obviously if they hit the 10-day letter rule, they hit the 5 and the 3-day also. And since they're all not in the same rule, we actually recommend using 1 rule with multiple criteria. So let's say that threshold is 5. So the precedence, 5-day, I just confused myself here. Higher. So that one was 6. We're going to say this is a 4. Okay, so this is our C1 letter rule. And let's go over here to the R320. We're going to run these letters and see if we have any students that meet this criteria. So up to today, and absence letter rule, let's go C1. And this one should generate too. It's going to show with an error, of course, for some reason, but well, that's thinking there. I'm going to jump down to task number 35, and that talks about the easy query, the attendance information in there. That is being used a little more, but there's still some issues in there because, again, that does not include the partial absences in the easy query in the absence graph here. Those partial absences are not included in there either. We don't have, did we get any of our students for today? Let's look at Sandra Abbott. Okay, back to the absence graph. And so there it's going to list all of her absences that she has and list the days present, excused absences for the individual students. Let's see if our attendance letter, yep, generated with an error. It generated. So we can see this student here, Paul King, or no, yes, Paul King, he has hit some of those thresholds, but you'll notice even though he had 8 unexcused absences, which means he hits the 5-day and the 3-day threshold, only 1 letter is going to be generated for him. If we go look at Paul King, we're going to go back to his attendance letter history. Sorry, this environment's being a little slow today too. We'll see a list here of any letter the student has received. So you can see he met criteria for multiple letters because I actually didn't select, but it tells us what date he actually hit those particular thresholds. And then of course he only has the 1 letter that was generated for today. Is there any questions on attendance as far as entering them, removing them, editing, adding codes, changing codes, anything like that? I don't have the date in front of me. I know it's a couple weeks here. We will be covering the HB 410 as far as all of the calculations and looking at all of the Analytics Hub reports and stuff for that. So I encourage you to sign up if you want further information on the HB 410. If not, again, we'll have an EMIS training this Thursday and then assessments next Thursday. And thank you for joining us today. We'll get this recording posted. Missy, what's the best way to handle the quarantine students? You mean as far as tracking them in here? Yes. What we've heard a lot are using the absence reasons. However, I know the one question with that is you have to, who all is supposed to see those students that were quarantined, a list of them. So it depends on who has access to see that information, how you want to do it exactly. But if you use your, you can use your summaries or your detail reports in here. And if you have a home quarantine absence reason, you can filter by on that to get a list of those students for a specified date range. So that's what we've heard. It seems a lot of them are doing is using the absence reasons to track those quarantine students. Should they be medical or non-absence? I have not heard either way. I don't think that's something that they, I don't know if the kids are still attending school, if they're still doing remote school, then they would still, you know, it would be a non-absence because they would still be in school if they're doing virtual. So it's going to be specific to the districts. Do you have schools that are doing something different? Or they're just up in the air still right now? Oh, and thank you, Amy, put that they were, the HB 410 training is on October 22nd at 9 a.m. Let me see. Yeah, I was thinking it'd be up to the district how they handle it. Yeah, I would assume since most of them are doing some sort of hybrid with virtual, that those kids that are under quarantine are probably still attending classes, meaning they're still going to have their actual attendance taken, so that they would enter them as a non-absence in the event that the student truly was not online for an entire day. They could still mark them excused and out for that particular day. Is there any other questions? All right, we'll go ahead and stop the recording here and we'll get that posted. And again, thank you all for attending. And if you have any questions, just go ahead and send your